What's up, guys? Justin here for Team Shenanigans, and today I will be bringing you guys a deck we've had for a little while, but I really never really played it. It was really Christie's deck, and I recently have just been bored with mine, and I picked this deck up and I've just been having a lot of fun with it. And, of course, as you can see, that is Harri Pale Moon. Now, it's not that much of a popular deck, and I, of course, am not the most well-versed Pale Moon player. So, but this is just what we've come up with the deck. Made a few little tech choices here and there, and I really enjoy it, and it's a really nice deck, profile to put out there, because there's a lot of different choices you can make. It's a very techy deck. It's not a deck like Royals and Shadows, where it's generally the same lineup. But anyway, let's go ahead and get into the deck profile. First, we run 4 copies of the new Harri, Masked Phantom Harri. This guy is a lot like the old one, except he, we'll go over the first skill first. GB2, Counterblast 1, at the end of your turn, when something is placed in Soul, you can add a grade 3 with the Magi ability from your Soul to your hand. So, for just a Counterblast, you can get Stride Fodder out of your Soul on the next turn, if you happen to Soul Charge another 3. Because both of your 3s that you run it for have the Magi ability. Then he has a skill, an auto skill, where when he is placed on your Vanguard circle, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, put one of them in the Soul, and put the other one to the bottom of your deck. And then his last ability is whenever you stride on top of him, you may pay the cost, which is Soul Blast 1, then call a card from your Soul to the rearguard circle. At the end of that turn, put that unit back into your Soul. So this is a very good card. It does a lot of the same things that original Harri does. The only thing it doesn't do is it doesn't give you power to what you call out. But on the flip side, he also doesn't cost a Counterblast to do that. The only Counterblast skill he has is the ability to add a grade 3 to your hand at the end of your turn if you choose to. So a lot of times it's best to go into him even though you're missing out on plus 5k power every turn, just to conserve your Counterblast. Because as you can see, I'm not running the PGG, because we were running it and I just didn't really like it. I wanted to run a techier card that can provide more defensive capabilities, because I usually want to be on this guy, and that'll conserve my Counterblast enough to kill my opponent before I run out of Counterblast. And then we run 4 copies of original Harri. Its GB2 skill is when it attacks, you can call something out from Soul and to rearguard and give it power plus 3. You're never going to use that GB2 unless you're really unlucky and you can't stride. And at that point, let's be honest, cards with GB2 that apply during your turn, unless it's like a Chrono Jet that you can get a swing after, with next stage, that little combination, those kind of combinations are the only things that work. The best GB2s that grade 3s can have are like defensive capabilities like Gabriel and stuff like that. So you're never really going to use this GB2. So the main skill you use him for is Counterblast 1. When something strides on top of him, you can pay the cost. Then you Soul Charge 1, and then choose a card from your Soul, call it to rearguard, and give it power plus 5. At the end of turn, it goes back to Soul. So basically, like I said, these 2 cards do the same thing, only this costs a Soul Blast and this costs a Counterblast. And of course, the Counterblast is more expensive than a Soul Blast, so he gets plus 5k power. They both have the Magi ability, and that comes very much in handy as like an 11k beater you can call out from Soul at any time. But they're both good grade 3s, and it's really nice having 8 Harri in the deck, so you're never stuck riding like a really bad backup grade 3 that you don't want to ride. Next, going on to the grade 2s, run the MVP grade 2 of the deck, Darkside Princess, at 4. Her skill is Rearguard. When she attacks a Vanguard, you may choose to give her power plus 5. If you do, at the end of the battle, she goes to soul. So you're really not losing anything with this. It's not a GB skill, so you can call it early and swing for 14 on a 9k base or a 7k base if you went first and you're a turn ahead of your opponent. And then she'll go to soul. And it may sound like you're negging yourself, but you want it in soul anyway. So that extra pressure, then it goes away because you're just going to be calling it back out of soul for the rest of the game. The fact you're always going to give her the plus 5k power because you're always going to be calling her out of soul with skills that will send her back to soul at the end of the turn anyway. So very, very good card, and the MVP grade 2 of the deck. Not the straight MVP of the deck, but the best grade 2. Next, we run 3 copies of Flying Paraton. It is basically the grade 2 version of Paratrooper. GB1 Magia, so it does have the Magia ability. Sadly, Darkside Princess does not. But it has the Magia ability. GB1, when it's placed on rearguard from hand or soul, you may soul charge 1. Well, you have to soul charge 1, it's not optional. And then you may choose up to 1 card from your soul and call it to the same column as this unit. You can call a booster behind it, or you can just call another grade 2 over it, like a Darkside Princess if you really want one. So run Flying Paraton at 3. It's really not needed at 4, it would get kind of cloggy. So I just run it at 3 because I really prefer the forced Darkside Princess. I don't want to compromise on that. And the last grade 2 spot, I choose to run 4 10k vanillas. Right now I was running 2 because I want to run this, but we only have 2 copies, the rest are in the mail. Just because it's OG art, and we've had these since Christy had Sword Magician Sarah built, like way back in the beginning. So you may be asking, in an effect-based deck where you want to constantly be calling stuff out of soul, why I'm running 10k vanillas. Well, it's because this is a GB-based deck, and you need to be able to live and get to GB. A lot of decks are doing this. I personally do it in Luard. I run 10k vanillas. Most decks are really running 10k vanillas if they can fit them into the deck. At first we weren't. We were running Lapin, the 9k grade 2 that when it attacks you soul charge 1. It will always get +2 from having a Harri Vanguard, and if you soul charge something with a Magia ability, it gets +3. So it's basically potentially a Darkside Princess at best. And it also has a GB2 skill where you counterblast 1 and can call a grade 1 from the soul. But I found that skill wasn't nearly as useful because it's not like an auto skill on attack or anything like that. It's a act skill, so you have to do it in the main phase. And usually you're filling up your board through other skills during the main phase, so I never found that skill useful. So I just feel like we get much more use out of the 10k vanilla. Even though it's dead late game, it can really save your butt early game riding it, and then your opponent can't just poke at you with 9ks. And you really want your opponent to ride to 3 so you can stride. And so this will help encourage them to go ahead and ride to 3 and not play the grade 2 game, because they won't be able to sit there and poke at you anyway. And if they do choose to stay at 2 and call their entire board to hand to have boosters to swing over your 10k, then they're not going to have much cards in hand, and you can Sabreeze them on the next turn. A little spoiler there about the G-Zone. Next, going into the grade 1s, now this is the straight up MVP of the deck. This grade 1 makes the deck work. It is just a better version of Flying Paraton. This is Cutie Paratrooper. This is always, you want this to be your ride target. If you don't ride this, and then you have to depend on randomly soul charging it, it kind of sucks. You really have to hope you get it in soul. So that's why we run, in that case, if you don't ride it, you might want to ride OG Harri just to get that extra soul charge every turn to hopefully pump this in soul. But Paratrooper is, she has the Magia ability and GB1. When this unit is placed on rearguard from a card with the Magia ability, so a Magia ability has to call it out, but pretty much everything you have in this deck that will call cards out has the Magia ability. you soul charge one, and then choose a card from your soul, not named Cutie Paratrooper, call it to the same column as this card, and give it power +5. So just the fact that just your constant combo in this deck, once you get to start striding, will be stride, Cat Knight, Paratrooper. Cat Knight calls out Paratrooper, Paratrooper calls out Arcside Princess, and you're just making power columns. Or you can Harri call out Paratrooper, give it +5, Paratrooper call out Darkside Princess, give it +5, and then you're swinging for what, a 31k column for one counterblast. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous power columns for free. The main point of this deck is to never be calling any cards from hand. You always want to call cards from your soul. That way you're constantly keeping cards in your hand, because the deck doesn't really have any innate hand advantage per se. Your hand advantage is simply not having to call any cards from hand. I do run draw triggers to help that problem, and of course the Harri crit, you can keep calling it out of soul every turn, and then it'll give you a booster, and then it'll go to soul, give your Vanguard +5, and draw an extra card every time. And since you're never calling it from hand late game, you're constantly calling it out of soul, it's technically a +1 every time you do that. So, if you're playing up against a deck that will sit there and get a lot of multi-attacks like Gears, you really need to get this and constantly draw that extra card every turn. It'll really help you out. Next, moving on with more of the grade 1s, run 4 Stride Fodder just because it is very important to be able to stride with this deck every turn. If you can't stride, then the deck just craps on you. Like most GB based decks, you just won't be able to do anything. You also, if you're in a matchup where you need a particular Harri for that matchup, you can't, and you have the wrong one, you can always drop this, reveal it, search the deck for the right one, and then discard a card. So there's that. Next, the perfect guard we're running right now is Lovely Companion. We were running the PGG, but kind of found that you didn't really need the countercharging that much unless you're on this Harri all game and they live through like your stride Harri turn with all the multi-attacks. Then of course you will have burnt through all your counterblasts by that point. But we just found that the extra defensive capabilities a card like this can give you really just helps the deck survive all those multi-poke turns. You can run Hoopmaster that does basically the same thing as this. It's just Hoopmaster costs a counterblast, and while the deck isn't super counterblast heavy, I feel like you don't need to be using counterblast defensively. You need to save them all for your offensive plays. So what Lovely Companion does is she is a regular perfect guard. She can guard for your rear guards. She can block for any unit, so that's good in the D-Police matchup. And I only mentioned the D-Police matchup because sometimes if you G-guard, you can call out a grade 2 from the deck. I don't know. If you're stuck with a grade 2 on the field and worried about them Laureling you, you can always guard to keep the Laurel from hitting the grade 2. But you're never really going to be stuck with rear guards on your opponent's turn, usually. So that doesn't really matter. It's just a neat little thing to keep in mind that this can guard rear guards too. So just normal, can't be hit if you discard a card. And then it has a GB2 Magia ability. When this card is retired from Guardian Circle, so just whenever it's done guarding and it goes to the drop zone, it counts as being retired. You can search your soul for a grade 2 and call it to the field. And then at the end of your opponent's turn, it goes to your soul. So you use this to call out like a useless 10k vanilla out of your soul as just a chump 5k interceptor. Or you can call a flying Periton. You get another soul charge if you're searching for stuff, and then again 5k shield for free. So it just nets you, it can help you block an extra poke. So it's a perfect guard that nets you more shield. That's very good. Next, the last grade 1 spot, I choose to tech 2 Betty. This came out of the trial deck. It's a nice little multi-attack card to help finish off your opponent. So if you have 3 counterblasts going into your dragon, I believe it's Dragon Masquerade Harri turn. So if you have 3 counterblasts, you can get off so many multi-attacks with this card. So what she says is when she boosts an attack after the battle, you can counterblast 1, shove whatever she boosted into the soul, and then call a card with the Magi ability out to a rearguard circle. So you really want her behind a Darkside Princess, because Darkside Princess will go to soul after the battle anyway. But it really doesn't matter what she's behind, because you're always calling stuff out with effects that will send them back to soul anyway. So even if she's behind a Periton or a 10k vanilla, the cost is counterblast 1, shove that card in the soul. The card's going to go back to soul anyway. The only reason I say Darkside Princess is because you can then call the same Darkside Princess out to the same spot. You don't have to call over anything. So there's that. Because Darkside Princess's effect to send her into soul activates at the end of the battle also. So they both go to activate at the same time, and of course you get to choose which resolves first. So that's the majority of the deck. So moving on to triggers, run 4 copies of the Fighters Collection G-Guard, because mainly it's got very nice artwork, it's hollow, and it does have an ability to where when it's discarded for the cost of the Fighters Collection G-Guard, which is actually a pretty good G-Guard when we run 1 copy of it, because it can really help turbo you into your GB8 if you're going for that. It just goes to soul. So it just gives you extra soul for like your new Harri's Soul Blast skill to call stuff out. So, and your PG also costs a Soul Blast to do its skill when it's retired. So it's a nice card, and there's really no reason to run any other heal unless you want that 5k potential booster. But my thought process is I never want to be calling a heal to field anyway, so I want to be saving them in hand, so why not run the thing that can potentially give me extra soul. Then we run 4 copies of the Harri crit. It's like all the Persona crits. When your Harri Vanguard swings, move this to soul, power +5, and draw a card. So you want to soul charge one of these like early game, and what I really like to do is, since Cat Knight never comes out early game, it stays in soul until you stride. If you call this behind, say your opponent goes first, or let's say you go first, you call this behind your grade 1. If they're like on a 6k grade 1, then all of a sudden it's not just a chump block. You call this behind your 10k vanilla and it's swinging 14 at their 9k. It's not just a chump block, just 10k no pass anymore. And you don't really lose anything by calling this early, because eventually what's going to happen is you're going to ride your Harri Vanguard, and then on that turn, swing, even if you can't stride, even if you're riding grade 3 first, swing, this goes to soul, that's 16. You replace it in your hand by drawing a card, and now it's in soul for you to call out every turn, whether with Cat Knight or any other skill, and constantly give your Vanguard plus 5k and drawing an extra card every turn after that point. So calling it early is definitely not a bad thing, and it's just going to be netting you advantage for the rest of the game if you choose to call it out with effects. Next we run 4 more crit. This is the Silverthorn crit. Its ability, the last part of its ability only works with a Lukier Vanguard, but you can still pay the cost, which is why we run this. It's the exact same as Link Joker players that run the Starvader crit that goes back to deck in the Messiah deck. So her cost is putting her on top of the deck, and then you shuffle the deck. Then the effect is, if you have a Lukier Vanguard, after you do that, you can choose a Silverthorn from your soul and call it. So you're never going to get to call anything with this, you're just going to be shuffling it back in deck for free, basically. It's a card out of hand, but a lot of times what will happen is you can call it out from soul with a Periton, and you just got a free card, so why not? It's a crit, so why not just shuffle it back in deck? So I tend to do that a lot when I have something else I need to call out anyway. If I do have like a 7k, I can call it from hand. Or I'm going to call something else out to that rearguard circle with another effect anyway. And I just want to put crits back in deck. So it's a very good card, and I really, really like it in the deck. You can run Poison Juggler instead if you want, but I highly recommend running this. Because, honestly, I've never used Poison Juggler's Move to Soul skill for Power Plus 3. You can run like 12 crit if you want and run it. You can do that, but I really like the draws. Speaking of the draw trigger, we run 4 copies of Rainbow Magician. A lot of people choose to run the stand instead, and that's perfectly fine. Just with my playstyle with this deck, I find that I wouldn't always want stands in deck, because some situations, if your opponent's at 4 and you stride into Lunatech, you're going to want to swing with like Vanguard first. So any stands you hit are basically null and void. Yes, it's 5k power, but it could have been a draw and netted you a free card. And the draws really help early game, even late game when you're running out of hand, because like I said before, the only hand advantage this deck has is through the crit and just natural hand advantage from not calling any cards from hand. So anytime you can plus with this draw trigger is really nice. Also, I really love its ability, which is when it boosts an attack that hits a Vanguard, you may Soul Charge 1 and then shuffle this card back in deck. So between the draw going back in deck and the crit going back in deck, you're constantly putting your triggers back in deck, and it really helps. There's also a stride that I'll get into later that you can choose 1 card from your soul and 1 card from your drop zone and put them back in the deck as part of the cost for its ability. So there's some pretty crazy things you can do there. Next, the starter is Cat Knight in Boots. Cat Knight in High Boots, to be exact. So this is, in my opinion, the best starter for G-Pel Moon. The other ones are okay, like there's nothing wrong with Happiness Collector, it's a really good skill, but why run any of that when you can run this? This gives you that natural hand advantage I keep talking about, because this is just your enabler. So he doesn't have the Forerunner ability, so when you ride over him early game, he's not going to move out from Soul, which is why I pointed out calling out the crit trigger, or you can even call out Rainbow Magician behind your Vanguard early game to hit for better numbers, if the number matters. Because the Rainbow Magician will just give you a free Soul Charge and go back to deck. The crit trigger will replace itself in your hand eventually anyway, and you do want 1 in Soul late game anyway to keep plussing, like I said. But Cat Knight really makes up for it in the late game. So GB1, when your other unit is placed on Vanguard, so from every time you stride, you can call this card out from Soul to a rearguard circle. And then its ability is Magia. When this card is placed on rearguard, when this card is placed on rearguard from Soul, you may choose a card from your Soul and call it to a rearguard circle. So this is a free +2 to your field every turn you stride. That is amazing. It really gives you so many combos with Paratrooper and Periton and Darkside Princess. It just really gets all your turns going, and you generally don't ever really have to use any cards from hand unless you draw into something you really want to call it out from hand late game. So that's the main deck, and now we're going to go into the G-Zone. Alright guys, so getting into the G-Zone, I have it arranged kind of in a specific order right now. Starting out, run, of course, 1 copy of Sabreeze, just because this is a GB-based deck, and you absolutely need to stride. So if your opponent tries to play the grade 2 game, you can Sabreeze them. You really want to be on Masked Phantom Harri when you do this, because that is going to cost 2 counterblasts, and you would rather not be on the old Harri and have to be paying the cost of a counterblast every turn to call out that free card that he can net you. So there's that to keep in mind if you have the choice in which to ride and you feel like your opponent's going to try to stall you out. If you might have to Sabreeze, definitely aim to ride this 3. Next, the go-to first stride is Amanda. This, in my opinion, is probably just one of the best on-hit strides we have, and it's just a very fun card. If your opponent takes this early game, if they're only at 1 or 2 damage, and they let this hit, you can just go off with some crazy first stride combos. Her ability is when she swings and hits, and she does have the Magia ability. Yeah, it's a Magia ability, so it works with Paratrooper. When she swings and hits, if she hits a Vanguard, of course, you can Soul Charge 1 and call any card from Soul out to rearguard circle. So you can swing with rearguard, fill up your field for free with your Cat Knight and your Harri skill and everything. Swing with 1 rearguard column, then swing with her. They let it hit, call something out, and then you get just a whole free attack. If you have a what was I gonna say? Like if you have a Betty on the field, it can get even more ridiculous. With like, or if you have a Betty in Soul, even swing with this column, swing with her. It hits, Soul Charge 1, call Periton out, Periton Soul Charge 1, call the Betty out. And now you can swing with this column over here, and then swing with this column, counterblast 1 for Betty, shove the Periton in Soul, call like a Paratrooper out over here, refill this column, and swing again. Just some really crazy combos. Next, another first turn stride option is 2 copies of Mephisto. I'm very iffy on this card. It's not that it's bad at all, it's just that to get full usefulness out of it, it's very slow. It's mainly in here for if you don't have a heal in hand, so you're not going to be able to G-guard, and you want to be able to stride into Harri or Fairfield, I believe his name is. Yeah, Fairfield. If you want to go into them as your second stride, you can stride into this first, because he does unflip anything in the G-zone. So then you'll be at GB3 on your next stride turn, if you can't G-guard. Usually you're going to want to go into Amanda, but Mephisto's an okay option. He just unflips anything, and then everything on your field gets power +1 for each face-up copy of him. So each face-up copy of Mephisto on the field. So in this deck, if you flip up him, everything's just going to get +1, which isn't a very big deal. It can help fix some columns if you need to, if you're having to call triggers. And but late game, he gets the ability to where you call cards from your soul equal to the number of every 2 face-up cards with the Magi ability in your G-zone, and they get power +5. So that's okay, but you're not going to really be wanting to go into him late game. It is an option, I guess, but there are better things to go into. I guess it depends on how many counterblasts you have available. Next, run 2 copies of Lunatic Dragon. This card is really good, and it is very free. So when this is placed on Vanguard Circle, you pay the cost, which is to just unflip a copy of himself. And then for the rest of the turn, whenever anything is called out from your soul, it gets power +2. So you do that first, because it's an on-placement skill, so it goes on the stack. Then you choose how everything resolves, and then you do all your skills to call stuff out. So then you're +4 to each column, and then behind your Vanguard. So that's 8 plus 18 to the board, right? My bad. +12 to the board. I can't math well. And then GB3, he gets a crit. So, very good. The crit, of course, does not stack, so don't read it wrong. He just gets the crit once for GB3. Next, speaking of crits, run 1 copy of Parallel Megatrick Fairfield. I was very iffy on this card at first, but through playtesting, when your opponent's at 4 damage, this card is amazing. Just amazing. So it's GB3, of course, and it is Magia. Yeah, almost all the strides are Magia. Just Lunatic's not Magia, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't call anything out. Oh, also something, before I forget about, just backtrack to Amanda. The card she does call out does get power +2. I'm a bad player, so I do forget that a lot. So when you call out a Darkside Princess with her, it does give Darkside Princess that +2, making it a 16k. So even if your opponent hits a trigger, if they're on 11k base and they hit a trigger to go up to 16, your Dark Side Princess getting power plus 5 plus the 2 from Amanda does make it a 16k column that hits. So don't forget that. It's very, very good. Anyway, back into this. Then we're backtracking. This card is amazing when your opponent's at 4. So what you do is it's GB3, Counterblast 2. Then choose a card from your soul and a card from your drop zone. Put them on top of your deck and shuffle your deck. Then, so that's the cost, and then you choose a card from your soul, call it to the field, and give it power plus 10 and a crit until the end of the turn. You also give that card the effect to Soul Blast 2, it gets power plus 5, and cannot be targeted for effects for the rest of the turn. So you won't be able to give it any more triggers for the rest of that turn, which is another reason I don't run stands in this. Because you can just give it a guaranteed plus 5 to bump it up another stage. And you may be saying, yeah, but the stand trigger can stand it and has a crit. That is true, but I don't know. It's not enough for me to justify running the stand trigger with, like I said, my play style and my attack combos, my attack orders that I like to do. And sometimes, like I said, on your Lunatic turn, you're going to want to swing with Vanguard first anyway. So, very good because, like I said before, you run the Silverthorn crit that you can just randomly shuffle back in deck whenever you get it out. And you combo that with this card. I've called one Silverthorn crit from Soul with a Flying Peryton before when I went into this card. Shuffled it back in deck, called another one from hand, shuffled it back in deck, then used this card's ability to put a crit from Soul and a crit from Drop back into deck, and give the rear guard that it calls out plus 10k and a crit, so you just added a crit to your board while shuffling 2 crits from his effect and whatever other Silverthorn crits you had in your hand or Soul back into deck through effects and everything. So it's just a ridiculous pressure card. Because now they have to deal with, you're going to Soul Blast 2, give that rear guard plus 5, swing with it first because it has a crit and they have to block it. Then they have to deal with your Vanguard swing. They have to basically treat it like it has a crit too, because you're getting triple drive and you just put crits back. And even if they perfect guard it, you're most likely going to have another big column on the other side, because it's probably a Dark Side Princess you called out with Paratrooper. So it's at least a 26k column before any trigger checks, which you're going to be stacking any triggers over there since they most likely guarded your Vanguard. And then they're going to have to deal with that possibly having a crit. So it really milks their hand, and you can really take them off guard, and not a lot of people have enough hand at that point in the game, if you can go into this as just your second stride, to deal with that kind of pressure. So if you rush them early and they go to 4, if they're at 4 by your second stride, that's just an amazing turn. And it's not hard to put them at 4 by your second stride, like I said, with Amanda and everything. So if you go Amanda, really pressure them, G-Guard on their turn, and then Fairfield on your next turn, it can be devastating. Then, going on to the next finisher, Dragon Masquerade Harri. This is probably, next to Fairfield, it's my favorite stride in the deck. He's your other finisher, and an amazing pressure card if they're at 5. Even if they're at 4 and they're low on cards in hand, if you don't really want to go Fairfield, or you already have and they survived for some reason, going into Harri can be absolutely devastating. So it's a Magi ability. When he attacks, you Counterblast 2, take 1 card from your field and shove it in Soul. Then you call 3 cards out to your field, and if you have 5 rear guards at that point, your opponent has to put 2 of their rear guards into their Soul. So for Counterblast 2, you're refilling your field on swing, taking their rear guards away, and you're just getting all these extra attacks. So you're going to fill your field for basically free when you stride into it. Swing with all them. Swing with him. If you can shove a Paratrooper back into Soul, and then that means you're going to refill your entire field basically. and get more swings, and it's just ridiculous. And the fact that it refills the field on swing is just amazing, because then you can put any triggers, if they guard this, onto those rear guards. Which is another reason why I don't run stands in the deck, is because of the attack order with this card, to get the max value out of it. It's an amazing card. Next, run one copy of the GB8. You're not always going to get to go into this, but when you draw all your hills and can G-guard like crazy, it's really not hard to go into, as long as you can survive. So her ability is GB8. When she attacks, you choose up to 5 cards from your soul, call them to rearguard. They get plus 5k power, and they become Abyss Dragons for the turn. And her ability is she gets plus 10k power for each Abyss Dragon on your field. So you're calling out 5 cards, she's going to get plus 50k. And then every card you just called out gets plus 5k. And it's an extra attack on top of that. Plus, like, it's free. No counterblasts. If you call a Betty out, you're going to have another extra attack. It's just ridiculous. All those extra attacks and free power. So, very good GB8. So, next up, these 2 strides I really honestly don't go into that often. I'm thinking about bumping Piranha up to 3 and taking the Millwards out just for the Shadow Paladin matchup. So if you don't know what Piranha does, it's Counterblast 1, choose a card from your hand and put it in the soul. Which the only targets I can think of that I wouldn't mind putting from hand in the soul, I really don't like that that's negging you, is like a Paratrooper or a Paratin or a Darkside Princess. Sure, I'll put that in soul and just plus off of it later. But it's once per turn, Counterblast 1, put 1 card from hand into soul, you unflip something in the G-Zone, and then you choose the same number of cards in your soul as face-up cards in your G-Zone with the Magia ability, and call them to rearguard. And then at the end of your turn, if you have 2 or more face-up Piranhas in the G-Zone, you can choose any number of them and they stay on the field. Otherwise, they all go back to soul. So the only reason I would really think about running her is, say if your opponent, like Kagro, can kill your stuff on your turn, then she can really help fill your field up for 1 counterblast. But besides that, it's just the Diablo matchup where you want to have rear guards on the field to retire for Diablo's effect. So, and if that's the case, then really I need to run 3. Because right now we've got 2 copies of Millward, just testing it out. It's an okay card, but I really find its skill kind of redundant with the calling out for a Soul Blast. And the plus 4s are okay. I don't know, it's just a very okay card. I would much rather stride into other stuff. I've strode into it a couple times, but it never really did anything for me. So her ability is once per turn, Soul Blast 2, and it's Soul Blast 1, it's a GB2 skill. You call 2 cards from your soul to rearguard and give them power plus 4. And then if you have a face-up, you choose a card on your field for every face-up copy of her, and give it the skill that when it hits, you call something from soul to a rearguard with the unit. So it's basically an on-hit skill where you basically just keep getting extra attacks. So it's nice if they're at 3 or 4 and you don't have a lot of counterblast to work with, and you're just like, hey, I just want to see how this can work. But like I said, I'm really thinking about taking them out for 2 more copies of Piranha. Next, moving into the G-Zone, 1 copy of Furnival, just a pretty standard G-Guard. When it's placed on the Guardian Circle, look at the top 3 cards of your deck, put 1 into Soul, and then if the card was a grade 1 or greater, it gets plus 5k shield. So it's nice digging for like your combo pieces and everything, and besides that, it's just plus 5k shield. Next, 1 copy of Doting Harlequin Maja. Her ability is if you have a grade 3 with a Magia ability, when she's placed on Guardian Circle, she gets power plus 5k, and you can call something from Soul to rearguard. So it's nice. It's basically the same as the Perfect Guard, but you have the option to call like a paratrooper out and get a soul charge, and then call the grade 2 out in front of it just for extra soul charging. So you can go paratrooper, then Paratin soul charge, and you just soul charge 2 basically, and you can intercept with the Paratin, and then the whatever you called out, if it's still there at the end of your opponent's turn, goes back to soul. So it's nice. Nice defensive play. Same concept as the Perfect Guard we run, just helps guard extra attacks. Then 1 copy of Jester Demonic Dragon, Wandering Dragon. Pretty standard G-Guard. It's very good. When it's placed on Guardian Circle, Soul Charge 1, and then you choose something from Soul and call it to Guardian Circle. So those extra triggers you Soul Charge, the extra 10Ks, just can really help this become a 26k shield. And you are digging for stuff with that random Soul Charge too. And then lastly, 1 copy of the Fighters Collection G-Guard. GB2, choose a G-Guardian from your G-Zone, a face-down G-Guardian from your G-Zone, and turn it face-up. This card gets plus 15k shield if you have 4 more different grades in Soul. So you'll have to have a 4, a 2, a 1, a 3, a 2, a 1, and a 0 in Soul, which is not hard to do at all. But yeah, that's the deck profile, guys. Definitely, Pale Moon is, like I said earlier, is one of those decks where you can tech a lot of different things, and the G-Zone can definitely change up depending on what your playstyle is. But I really like these ratios and everything, except, like I said, about wanting to take the Millwards out for 2 more Piranhas just to use it, because I really see no use for Millward, honestly, in this deck. But, if you like the video, make sure to leave a like down below and comment with any questions or comments or anything like that. And feel free to test out the build if you want and let me know what you think. And as always, thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for more Buddy Fight and Cardfight Vanguard content. Thanks. Thanks for watching the video, guys. Please remember to subscribe to the channel if you already haven't. You can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter to stay up to date on everything Team Shenanigans.